Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today, we are diving deep into one of the most dramatic turning points in Eastern Europe, a moment filled with tension, uncertainty, and the real possibility of major political transformation. The crisis known as Belarus on the brink. Army rejects Lukashenko has captured global attention, and in this video we will explore the backgrounds, motivations, events, reactions, and global consequences surrounding this shocking development. The situation is evolving, but the patterns, decisions, and statements emerging from Belarus paint a very clear picture of a country standing at a historic crossroads. Belarus has long been under the rule of Alexander Lukashenko, a leader often referred to by Western media as Europe's last dictator. For decades, he maintained an iron grip on the country through centralized control over security forces, the economy, media, and political institutions. But the events now unfolding show that the old tools of control are weakening. What once looked like an unshakable regime is now facing its most serious challenge from within the very institution that kept it standing, the Belarusian Army. To understand the gravity of the military's rejection, it is important to see how the social and political climate in Belarus has changed over recent years. Public dissatisfaction has been growing steadily, driven by accusations of election fraud, economic stagnation, widespread corruption, and a general lack of political freedom. The 2020 protests were a major sign of this growing frustration. Millions of Belarusians signaled that they wanted change, yet the government responded with massive crackdowns, arrests, intimidation, and violence. While this may have temporarily suppressed public outcry, it did not silence the underlying anger. Now, several years later, the political pressure has begun to seep into the institutions of the state, especially the military. Soldiers and officers are also citizens. They have families, neighbors, and memories of the unrest. They watch the news, hear the stories, and see the widening gap between the government and the people. Many of them reached a point where blind loyalty no longer made sense. This shift in loyalty is what has pushed the country into a dangerous but decisive moment. The current crisis escalated when reports emerged that several high-ranking military officers refused to support Lukashenko's latest measures against dissent. For years, the army had followed orders without visible hesitation, but this time the situation was different. The refusal did not come from ordinary soldiers, it came from strategic leaders within the defense structure. Their rejection indicated a deep moral, political, and institutional split. It wasn't simply a matter of disagreement. It was a sign that the military no longer saw Lukashenko as the legitimate representation of the nation. When the first reports of military defiance surfaced, Belarusian citizens reacted with a mixture of shock, hope, fear, and uncertainty. For some, it felt like the beginning of long-awaited change. For others, it raised worries about instability or conflict. And for the government, it triggered a wave of emergency measures designed to stop the rebellion from spreading. Officials issued strong statements calling for discipline and unity, but the public tone could not hide the fear beneath it. The leadership understands that once the military fractures, it becomes nearly impossible to maintain control. As tension increased, foreign governments began issuing statements of concern. Russia, Belarus's closest ally, watched carefully, especially because Belarus is a crucial strategic buffer between Russia and NATO countries. Russia has invested heavily in keeping Lukashenko in place, but even Moscow can sense that the situation has shifted. If the Belarusian military rejects the government, Russia faces a difficult choice: intervene to support Lukashenko or adjust to a new political reality. Both choices come with high risks, and that uncertainty adds even more complexity to the crisis. Meanwhile, European nations expressed support for democratic processes and urged the Belarusian leadership to avoid using force against its own population or military. International analysts raised the possibility of negotiations, transitional governance, or even large-scale political reform. But the path ahead remains unclear. What is clear, however, is that the world is witnessing a rare moment where internal power dynamics decide the future of an entire nation. Inside Belarus, the situation has created intense pressure on Lukashenko himself. For decades, he projected an image of absolute confidence and control. But now that image is cracking. Security footage, leaked documents, and insider reports suggest rising paranoia within the presidential palace. Meetings are becoming more secretive, trusted advisors are being reshuffled, and actions are becoming increasingly unpredictable. Leaders in such situations often rely on loyalty tests, purges, or emergency decrees, and some of those signs have already appeared. But even these measures might not be enough. The key problem the regime faces is that a political system built on fear can collapse the moment that fear disappears. When people see high-ranking generals refusing orders, that fear weakens. When soldiers question government actions, that fear weakens. And when citizens see the cracks in the system, they begin imagining alternatives. This shift in imagination is one of the most powerful forces in any political transformation. Once people believe that change is possible, even deeply rooted regimes begin to lose their foundational stability. That is what is happening in Belarus now. The military's rejection is not just a refusal to follow orders. It is a symbolic moment showing that the government no longer holds unquestioned authority. Reports also reveal that several battalions have demanded transparency regarding the government's decisions, particularly concerning internal security operations and Belarus's ties with foreign powers. The demand for transparency is extremely significant in a system that has traditionally relied on secrecy. This demand suggests a desire for accountability, reform, and a more open political framework. At the same time, the government has attempted to counter the military's resistance by strengthening loyalty among elite security units, including special forces and intelligence divisions. These groups historically supported the president and were rewarded with privileges. However, even within these forces, quiet dissatisfaction is growing. The majority of their members are middle-class citizens facing the same pressures as everyone else: economic challenges, rising living costs, and limited opportunities for political expression. While institutions are shifting, the general public is also navigating a mix of emotions. Many feel cautiously optimistic, sensing that the first real opportunity for political transition in decades might finally be emerging. Others fear what might come next. History has shown that transitions can lead to peace and freedom, but they can also lead to conflict, division, or foreign intervention. Belarus is standing at a moment where almost any direction seems possible. The opposition movement, though previously suppressed, has begun regaining momentum. Activists, journalists, and political figures living abroad are calling this moment a turning point. Their messages are reaching Belarus through social media networks, encrypted channels, and underground communication routes. They see the military split as the first step toward democratic reform and the return of political freedoms. They encourage peaceful mobilization, unity, and patience. Inside the country, younger generations are playing a major role. Many of them grew up with internet access, broader worldviews, and exposure to global democratic movements. They want a country that offers opportunities rather than restrictions. Their voices, which were once forced into silence, are now gaining courage due to the cracks forming in the state apparatus. Their participation, both online and offline, is shaping the direction of public discourse. Meanwhile, the economic situation adds even more pressure. Sanctions, isolation, and long-term financial mismanagement have weakened the economy. Many Belarusians struggle with inflation, unemployment, and limited access to resources. These economic frustrations feed directly into political dissatisfaction, and when the economy falters, even loyal supporters of the government begin questioning its effectiveness. As the crisis unfolds, misinformation and propaganda have also intensified. The government attempts to portray the military as unified, while independent sources reveal deep divisions. Narratives compete for control over public perception. In such tense moments, information becomes a battleground of its own. People are trying to differentiate truth from manipulation, and the ability to do so affects their views and decisions. The next major question is whether the situation will escalate. Will the government attempt to forcibly regain military loyalty? Will more officers defect? Will foreign powers intervene? Each potential outcome carries enormous consequences. If the government uses force against its own military units, it risks triggering a civil conflict. If the military fully abandons the government, the regime may collapse rapidly. If foreign intervention occurs, Belarus could become the center of a much larger geopolitical struggle. Experts suggest that the most likely path is continued internal pressure, leading to negotiations or political concessions. But nothing is guaranteed. Political systems under stress can behave unpredictably, especially when leadership is unwilling to acknowledge public demands. What makes this moment truly historic is that the army's rejection is not simply a political disagreement. It is a fundamental shift in the balance of power. The military has always been the government's strongest pillar of control. Once that pillar weakens, the entire structure becomes unstable. And when instability grows, public expectations rise. This moment is also important for understanding the regional balance of power. Belarus lies between Russia and Europe, both of which have strategic interests in the country's future. A democratic transition in Belarus could shift geopolitical dynamics, while the continuation of authoritarian rule would maintain the current balance. The military's decision, therefore, has implications far beyond Belarus itself. As events continue developing, the people of Belarus are preparing for uncertainty. Some fear chaos, while others hope for freedom. What unites them is the understanding that their country is changing, whether they are ready or not. The political landscape that existed for decades is being reshaped, and every citizen, soldier, and leader is part of that transformation. In moments like this, history often moves quickly. What once seemed impossible can happen in a matter of days. Leaders who appeared invincible can lose power overnight, and societies that lived in silence can suddenly find their voice. Belarus is standing at such a moment. The military's rejection is not the end of the story. It is the beginning of a new chapter, one filled with challenges, risks, and opportunities. As we look at the situation today, it is clear that the decisions made in the coming days will shape the nation's identity for generations. Will Belarus move toward reform? Will it fall into conflict? Will foreign powers influence the outcome? These questions remain open, and the world watches closely. For now, what we can say is that Belarus is on the brink of major change. The army's rejection of Lukashenko marks a turning point in the nation's political history. And no matter what happens next, this moment will be remembered as the time when the foundations of the old system began to crack. Thank you for watching, and stay tuned for more updates as we continue to follow this historic unfolding story. Make sure to subscribe for more in-depth explanations and detailed breakdowns of global events. Stay safe, stay informed, and I'll see you in the next video.